This week I am um you know how I'm always talking about like some certain weeks we have like heavy text.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like this story is heavy, but trying to tell it in a way that makes sense is heavy because it's
Yeah.
so many like parts, and Joseph's story like spans so many chapters that
Yeah.
I was like, okay, how much background do I really need to give? So I'm gonna try to give enough. But I'm definitely gonna have to do the whole like, okay, now you gotta go back and read because this is gonna be the cliff note version.
Yeah. When
Like,
you sent me, what we were gonna be doing, I said, "Oh, this is a lot of backstory we got to give here." But you're like the consummate like teacher, Shay. And that's not even me trying to gas you. That's just being real. So I was like, well, if anybody can do it, Michelle can do it because it was me. I was like, Lord, how are we gonna cut through this? But I felt very confident that you were able to do it.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think what we'll do, and I know that we're live now and people will probably join shortly, but maybe what I'm thinking is I'll give a little bit of background and we can go to the text. What I would like to do is because I feel like people really identify when you and I share stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, as we're going through tonight, thinking about seasons of our lives that have felt like preparation seasons, um, and maybe being able to tie that back to Joseph, because, another thing about this text is, I don't want people to feel like I'm saying that God puts us in position to experience this kind of pain
Yeah.
or this kind of preparation.
Yeah.
I want them to know and understand how they can navigate their own seasons of preparation, no matter how they look.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
I want that to, come out. And I hope that, as people again join and they view that they realize, I'm not necessarily excusing, Joseph being sold into slavery, right? And I'm not
Yeah.
excusing his siblings doing what they did to him, but more so I'm saying I want people to walk away from this knowing that exactly what you said last week, right? You need to see every season as significant, and
Yeah.
as painful and as hard and as frustrating as it may be, there's an opportunity for you to take it and for God ultimately to use it to cause all these things to truly work together, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what really happened for Joseph. So that's what I hope we get out of this. Kind of, I guess I'm reading the book backwards, but that's fine. We'll
They
do
heard you. They
it.
heard you, Michelle. You got to put people on. They heard you. That's the point
Okay,
we're trying
cool.
to get across, guys.
Yes, that's the point. So I'll go ahead and kick it off and say thank you for joining us again for week whatever of our virtual Bible study slash sit down slash
Fireside
community chat.
chats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, fireside chat, just everything. I feel like this has been a little bit cathartic for me, and it's been definitely a blessing to be able to share this space with Tori. So I'm grateful. Thank you all for joining us tonight for another edition of this. And this week's text, if you heard my little blurb just a few minutes ago, it's short, but it has a lot of background. So I definitely want us to get started, but maybe Tori, if you want to give us a little bit of what we talked about last week, because I think that you set a wonderful foundation for what this week will be.
Yeah, so last week we hit on the life of Moses again, and we broke down the idea of the fact that God doesn't allow any of our experiences to ever to go to waste. And that every season of our life, no matter how the ups or the bads, good or bad of it, is significant, it's important. And towards the end of Moses' life, we see how God used every trial and tribulation and those 40 years in the wilderness, right, to prepare him, to propel him to lead the children of Israel. And so we wanted you guys to know that there is nothing in your life that you're experiencing, that you're going through, or will face, that God will not use and get the glory out of. Nothing you've experienced will go to waste.
Yes, 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 yes. And I mean, like, when I tell you, see it as significant has got me through the last week. Girl, like every chance I get, I'm like writing it down. Like, okay, I know you frustrated right now, but you got to see it as significant. Because,
Significant.
we lose sight of that. And it's so easy for us to say it in this moment and during
Yeah.
these times, when we have our Bibles open and we're reading our daily devotions. But what about those days when you don't feel like opening up your Bible? You don't feel like worshiping. You don't feel like praising. How do you still muster the faith enough to see even those days as significant, right? To be able to acknowledge that I'm not perfect. So there are going to be days when I fall off, but I can get back on. And God, I'm trusting that you will make these moments significant for me. So thank you, ma'am, for doing that. Such a joy to sit in this forum with you. This week, guys, we're talking about the story of Joseph. So I don't know if people really truly know the story of Joseph, or if we just hear like Joseph in the coat of many colors, and then it's like, oh yeah. But Joseph went through some things, man. Like he went through it, and definitely not on the level of Job in terms of what he experienced, but in some ways I feel like their stories are a little bit similar. Even a little bit kind of like David, especially, and they have a few things in common with the shepherding and the run-ins with people's wives and all that kinds of stuff. So yeah, we'll get started. And like I said, this week's theme is don't take it personal. And in case you missed my blurb, I'm going to reestablish it at the end. But I just want us to get to a place where we can take what we talk about in these forums, what we discuss in the Bible, in the text, and be able to apply it to our circumstance. So I don't want anyone to ever, well, first of all, since we haven't said it in a while, neither Tori and I are biblical experts. We are not like, we don't exegete text. We don't know all the fancy words. We just do this because we feel like it is fulfilling an assignment that God has given us, and that is all. So if by any means you feel like we've said something wrong or out of order, or maybe you want to offer something, please feel free to drop it in the comments. We're open. We're open to some constructive criticism and feedback. We welcome it, in fact. But we just want you to know, we are counting on you to also do the work. Don't just take what we say word for word, but go into your own Bible, do your own studies, read up on your own commentaries, and then form your opinions based on those things. So we're talking about Joseph, the dreamer, and that our key text is actually Genesis chapter 45, verses 7 through 8. And I'm going to read them, and then I'll tell you why we're starting there. So, like I said, Genesis chapter 45, verses 7 through 8. And the text reads, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. I actually want to read it from the New Living Translation too, just so you have a few things to kind of marinate on. So from the New Living Translation, verses 7 and 8 read, God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace, and the governor of all Egypt. Okay, let's get into it. So, like I said, this is Genesis chapter 45, verses 7 through 8. Interestingly enough, Joseph's story spans Genesis chapter 37 all the way to Genesis chapter 50. In that time, we see a lot of transition for Joseph, right? He goes from living in his father's house shepherding with his brothers, to being sold into slavery, to living in Potiphar's house, ultimately succumbing to Potiphar's wife and her little lustful thinking. He's then imprisoned. From there, he's imprisoned. He interprets a few dreams. And finally, he ends up in Pharaoh's house. I was going to initially break down all of that, but I don't think we necessarily have to. I think it'll just kind of come up organically as we continue to talk, Tori.
Yeah.
But we find Joseph in chapter 45, verses 7 through 8, in front of the very brothers who have sold him, or let me take it back. They didn't technically sell him into slavery. They put him in a position to where he could be sold into slavery. And I will go ahead and break down that little piece because I think it kind of helps for those of you who are unfamiliar with the story. So Joseph is the favorite of his father, Jacob. Jacob and Rachel have a child, and it results in Joseph. And what ends up happening, it's just two. I only have one sibling, right? So my parents really never had to worry about one of us looking like the favorite because they were able to kind of equally give out the love, right? And attention. Yeah. So that was never a thing for me. But I'm positive. Back in the day when, men could have more than one wife, and they were having more than one wife, and they were having multiple kids, that it probably came up like, this person is the favorite or that person is the favorite. The text tells us very clearly that Jacob favored Joseph because he was considered the son of his old age. Mm-hmm. And so that was already kind of a target on Joseph's back. And so his brothers are viewing this favoritism like, hey, yo, you're like, Dad, what's up with this? Like, why does Joseph get all these things? And like I said, we all know from Sunday school or Veggie Tales or whatever, Joseph got this coat of many colors or this robe, right? That was a symbol of royalty or his ascension to royalty ultimately. And so, the hateration was real thick, right? They had a lot of it. For Joseph. And so they eventually decide, you know what? Let's just kill him. Let's just get him out of here. We will say some wild animal ate him and we'll be done with Joseph. We won't have to worry about him. Plus, that little dream he had that talked about all of us submitting to him, bowing down to him. Like, that ain't gonna mean nothing, right? What ends up happening, and Tori, I know you know this story, but I hope that people are able to keep up because I am definitely paraphrasing. What ends up happening is that this plot to kill Joseph, Reuben, Joseph's brother, intervenes and says, hey, let's not shed any blood. Let's just put him in a pit, leave him for dead, and say, that an animal killed him. They didn't bargain for the fact that while Reuben's plan to leave him in a pit, and they were thinking another brother comes up and says, well, let's sell him into slavery, that someone would get to him before they do. Yeah. They don't even have a chance to really sell him into slavery because the Ishmaelites come, and then the Midianites end up selling Joseph into slavery to the Ishmaelites, who then sell Joseph into slavery to Potiphar. So that's how Joseph ends up in Potiphar's house. His brothers set him up. Some other folks intervene, and then he ends up in Potiphar's house. Like I said, when we meet Joseph in chapter 45, which is the key chapter and verses for our text, Joseph is now reunited with his brothers. And I think it's important for you to have that background so that you can kind of understand how he got here. So Joseph is reunited with his brothers in his own space, right? Yeah. In my mind, as the full interpretation or reality of what his initial dream was. So Joseph, very early on, has these dreams that shows his family submitting to him. And now they really are having to submit to him. I see you shaking your head, Tori. So I'm gonna kick it over to you. Just if you have any comments about that, because it is interesting the way that the tides really truly turn.
It is very interesting. And when you were talking, I just something that came to mind was just the idea of how when Joseph originally had that dream and all the things he went through before he got to that point,
Yes.
right? And just how that looks like for us,
Yeah.
where God has given us maybe glimpses of what our future could be, or maybe somebody has spoken something to your life. But then as we're going through these different seasons and stages, it looks nothing like the final product.
Yep.
And just how maybe he was feeling in between, like, okay, I know I saw my brothers bound down to me, but I am a whole slave out here. And then you go to being, in a good position. Then now I'm a prisoner now. I'm an inmate, right? Yep. So like we're like just all the different feelings and all the different emotions that are tied into when your experiences look nothing like what God has promised you.
Yes.
Right? Yes. So for me, it was just like I can relate to that because a lot of days I'm like, this don't look nothing like what you told me, Lord. So for me, that was the biggest part. It's like, wow, like just all the different emotions, all the different feels, all the different seasons he went through.
Yeah.
Before that dream actually came to fruition, and for him to just even still to be alive, right, and not have given up.
Yeah,
it is amazing within itself.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because ultimately that's the reason that I chose this text to teach this week, because like we said, this month is about preparation, and it's about the different ways that life prepares us for what God has for us. And so I said that to say that God uses all things to prepare us. So life is what prepares us for what God has. It's not necessarily that God is sending Joseph into slavery, or God is sending Joseph to prison, right? It's all things working together for the ultimate good that God has for us. And I think that, we've talked about this before, about living in a generation or a society where instant gratification is something that we're often looking out for, right? You have fast food restaurants. You pull up to the drive-thru. I say I want a number 5 with a Coke, extra cheese. I pull up to the window. They give it to me and I'm gone, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 5-6 minutes tops. 10 minutes if you're going to Popeyes, like I usually do. But you know what I mean? So it's like we're used to asking for something, paying for something, getting that something. We are not used to God dropping visions of our future into our minds and into our spirits, and then having to wait 30 years or 20 years. Or look at Moses. Look at how long Moses had to wait to get to where God had prepared for him to get. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that that's something that we actively, as believers, we have to shut it off. We have to shut off that part of our brain that makes us think that the visions that we have, the dreams that we have, are going to be instant. They are not. They're just not. Can God make something happen instantly? Yes. But is he going to do it without you being prepared for it? No. And so that's why this text is important, because Joseph went through several different seasons of preparation. And it could be argued that, it was to form Joseph's character. We don't really get a lot of that from the text. The author of Genesis doesn't really give us that much. But what it does show us is that every season builds upon the next.
Yeah.
So very early on, we said what Joseph had these dreams. Well, he was used to interpreting dreams, and he goes into several different situations where his dream interpretation, his gift, ends up being what gets him to the next season. And so I don't want us to miss that either, is that it's important for us to know our gifts, know what God has placed inside of us, so that in those times, like Tori said, in those seasons where it feels like, God, this reality is not lining up with what you said you had for me, right? Knowing and understanding, though, that as long as I have that gift and I'm working that gift, that the promise still stands. So just know that, your right now might not look like, the multi-million-dollar person you're supposed to be, but $100 in your bank account means nothing, or however many dollars in your bank account means nothing if you're not actively using and executing the plan that God has for your life and using those gifts to do so. So yeah, so I think that, like I said, going back to Joseph in his seasons of preparation, there are many different instances where Joseph could have given up. He could have said, yeah, this is not what I bargained for. God, what about that dream you gave me at 17 that said, my brothers and them were going to be bowing to me? Like, I'm in prison with a cupbearer and a baker. Like, what is this about?
Yeah. I think something that shouldn't get lost in this either, Michelle, is I think sometimes when we think about the favor of God, right, and God's hand being on our life and things like that, I think we think of that in the sense of a life free of struggles, a life free of problems, because in the stories you read where it says God was with Joseph,
Yes.
He was with him.
Yes.
But if you didn't read that part and just was reading about all the things that were happening to him, it would look as though maybe this was the opposite. Like this was God working against Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the fact that you highlighted that we're not saying that this was God's doing, right? Because God gives us free will. Ultimately, He's in control. But people do things to us, and different things happen, and it's not God did it.
Yeah.
But we serve a God that will use those horrific things and work it in our favor.
Yeah.
But back to the favor, we should just never get, because for me, I was like that for a little while, Michelle. I was like, okay, God, like, why am I struggling? Why am I going through this? Like, this is not your hand on me. This can't be.
Girl.
Right? Favor looks like problems sometimes. Favor looks like disappointment sometimes. Favor is not just this, everything is great. And so, again, I think it may be a generational thing too, like you said, the instant gratification we look for, and even just the idea or thought that if we are blessed or favored, that we don't struggle, that we don't have problems, but that is in fact the opposite. What favor does for us is that no matter what we face, no matter what we go through, God will ultimately get the glory out of it.
Yes.
He can take us through a muddy situation and it comes out on the other end being pure, clean, and something good. That is what favor is. And I know I had to grow into that, because for the longest I was just like, yeah, am I cursed? Are you mad at me? And so like Joseph, right? God shows you this vision of them bowing to you, and then you end up looking up out of this well at them. They don't throw you down in the pit.
Yeah.
This cannot be your hand. And so we have to start to look at, we were talking about this before we got on, Michelle, looking at no matter what happens, we got to find the good out of it. It's all about perspective. The battle is usually in our mind and how we choose to see things. But I really want to bring it out about favor, that it's not just this, God just going to push everything through.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're going to struggle a little bit. It's going to be a little tight over here, right? Because how else then can we testify to those things? When people are experiencing, because if God would protect everybody who professes to love Him from life struggles and trials, how could we then draw anybody? Because that means we're not facing stuff that people in the world are facing, but no, you got to go through too.
Yes.
But I'm going to be your comforter. I'm going to be there with you, and I'm going to make sure that you're going to come out better for it. We do not get to omit the troubles and trials of life.
Right. Yeah, you don't get the free pass. You don't get
No.
So first of all, thank you for bringing that up. That is a beautiful point, and I actually wrote it in my notes, because in chapter 39, when Joseph is in Potiphar's house, it talks about how God blessed Potiphar's house because of Joseph's presence in Potiphar's house. Think about what that means, right? This young man has been sold into slavery. And I don't want us to think about, chattel slavery, American slavery, not like that. No. Still slavery, but different.
Yeah.
But still, he was in a state of servitude to Potiphar, right? But God still favored him in this position of servitude, so much so that not only was he blessed, but the owner of the house, his master, was blessed. That's huge to me. And I think that sometimes, going back to your point, Tori, about how we view the seasons of our lives, right? We think, okay, well, I'm having a bad season right now, so that must mean God isn't favoring me, God doesn't love me, God's not hearing me, God's not listening to me. We start to think all those things, and I can say that because I've been there. What life has taught me is that every season is my season. It's just that certain seasons are about reaping and other seasons are about sowing. And so once you see that, like you said about your mind, positioning your mind to see perspective that is different from what your flesh is telling me. And so often we only plug into our flesh, and we only feel the humanness, but we can't feel the spirit inside of us, or we don't allow the spirit inside of us to show up the way that God wants it to in our lives, to keep us moving through. And so as you were talking about that, I thought about a rainstorm, walking through the rain. Growing up in Georgia, we get rain, you get rain all the time. And I remember moving to California, people were like, oh, you won't need an umbrella. And the Georgia in me was like, no, girl, I need an umbrella. So I keep an umbrella in my car. And I just think about, the difference between walking through a rainstorm with an umbrella and without an umbrella, right? Yeah. And that's the way I view walking through life with God's covering. Oh, it's like you can walk through the rain and you can be soaking wet, or you can walk with this umbrella. You're still in the storm. Don't get me wrong. You're still in the storm, but you have covering. And what that means is that when you get to the place, wherever your destination is, you won't be drenched. You won't be soaking wet. You might have some tears, but you won't be drenched. And so I try to hold on to that as an example of what walking in the faith is like versus walking outside of the faith. And that's not me shading anybody's beliefs or anybody's faith, but I'm just saying how that works for me and how I try to remind myself that this walk and this journey is worth it. Because to your point, none of us, we are not exempt from the trials of the world. I don't care how hard you pray to God. I don't care how hard you believe. I don't care how many Hail Marys you give, how many burnt offerings you send up. We all still gonna have to, we face some things. We're all going to have to carry a cross. And it's important that even new believers get that from the very beginning, because I believe that, so often when you're new to the faith, we can position a seasoned Christians can really present this picture or this perception that our lives are perfect. And when we do that, we cripple other people's faith, because as soon as they hit some hard times or they hit something that they feel is unbearable, they don't know how to navigate. They don't know how to move forward. And so I would just say, as a side note, that as a believer, we should be beacons of hope, but we should also be beacons of transparency and beacons of authenticity, so that people know we have similar problems. I have issues. Sometimes I don't feel like reading my Bible. Sometimes I don't feel like doing Bible study. Sometimes, there are many things that I face as a believer, but what pulls me back in is God's track record. And I realize that he's always been consistent to me, that he's never failed me, that he has never left me alone. And so if I want to do life on my own, I can. But why would I choose to, knowing God's resume? If I'm gonna have a fighting chance in this world, I know that I want to be in covenant with God. And so that is my personal decision, and that's what I choose. And so to bring it back to Joseph, right? That is what Joseph had. Joseph had the favor of God over him, so that no matter where he was, he still was able to experience joy. To your point, Tori, he was able to experience life through a different lens, and it ultimately led him to where he originally dreamed.
Yeah, I love just when you were talking about walking through a storm. I could imagine that. And so something to think about is when we're going through trials, or in Joseph's situation, your brothers are the one that put you in this position. It ended up good, but he could have been bitter, right? Could have been very angry. And I think we could argue that he would have had every right to feel that way. So like I don't want people think like, oh, you bitter and you mad. Like, no, like sometimes you have a right to feel that way. But it doesn't serve you.
Right.
Bitterness and angry does not serve you. You are valid in those feelings. Because I think sometimes what we hear as, like you said, seasoned things, right?
Uh-huh.
You shouldn't be like that. No, no, no. I should definitely be mad.
Yes.
But how is this going to serve me? How is this going to serve you? And so imagine if Joseph was bitter and angry.
Yeah.
What would that have done for his family? And I know some folks might be saying bump his family.
Yeah.
Or would he have made it to that position, right? That stature, if he had that in his heart?
Oh.
Because I'm a firm believer that what is in us, whether it's bitterness or anger, can stunt our growth.
100%.
And it's not that God doesn't have these grand plans for you, but He can't put you in this position if you're gonna get up there and stunt on everybody that ever talked about you.
Yeah.
Like this is not your stunt season. They see and they know they could. It's written so many times that people could see the hand of God on Joseph. They could see God working through Joseph. They saw it. So he didn't need to stunt. He didn't need to flex on. So for all of us, and I'm talking to me too.
Me too.
Bitterness and anger will not serve any of us.
Yeah.
It is in the best interest of your future and the plans of God to release it and know that God is going to use whatever anybody ever tried to do to harm you or hurt you, what anybody ever said about you. He's going to use that to elevate you, because had they not put Joseph in that pit, he would not have been in that position.
Thank you.
To save them when they needed it.
Yes.
Like you said, don't take it personal.
Yes.
Don't take it personal.
Girl, you could have taught this.
Oh no.
Yes, you could have. I mean, everything you just said, right? So I'm so glad that the conversation has led us back to the text, because ultimately that's what verses 7 and 8 are saying. It's in my mind, it's almost like, well, okay, so I like to watch Iyanla Fix My Life. So she always has, on these episodes, she has these people who have these maybe shared traumas or mutual traumas, and she's bringing them back so that they can reconcile and they can move forward.
Yeah.
And so I kind of envision this little section of Joseph with his brothers as an intervention, almost like Joseph is relinquishing any anger he had, any bitterness he may have had, any ill will he had toward his brothers. He's saying, you know what? Don't worry about that. And the fact that he was so I don't even know what the word is, so gracious, maybe, that he could go to the people who are responsible for his demise, right? And say, God put me in this position so that I could save you. I mean, it's just like, wow. Like that's the kind of maturity I aspire to, right? Because so often I'm caught up on, girl, what you said, or like, just you get caught up. You just get caught up, and yes, you take it personal. And I'm, as an empath, I take things personal, and I have to constantly pray about that and realize that oftentimes people are just projecting onto you what they feel about themselves, and so it isn't even about you. It's about something else that has happened, something else that has been done to them, something else that they have experienced that they are then maybe attacking you for or about. And so I just have to remind myself of how gracious Joseph is in this moment. And he says it twice, right? He says it twice. Like, don't worry about that. It's like, I forgive you. I forgive you for whatever happened, because God knew that he was using all of that to bring me here to save our family. And that is really the essence of preparation, right? To be able to say, yes, I'm going through this circumstance right now, but I don't have to stay here. That every season of my life is preparing me for something else. And I wouldn't say, that Joseph knew when he got sold into slavery, I'm sure he was not thinking about those dreams. He wasn't saying, oh yeah, this is great because I know that I'm going to come out on top. He wasn't saying that. He was probably like, God, this isn't what I had in mind. I want to live what you told me. And so it's my belief, though, that Joseph's faith had to be strong enough to where he held it, even if it was just a glimmer. He held a glimmer of that dream to the side to kind of keep him going, because he went through some stuff, some crazy stuff.
Yeah. Something when I was getting ready, ever since you said it, it stuck with me. God breaks the system, right? So everything about Joseph's life is God showing us how he breaks the system. Even to how, initially at Potiphar's house, Potiphar was like the assistant to Pharaoh.
Yes.
And now Joseph moves up like, okay, this sets me back to prison, but now I get to move and I get to be a governor. I'm right next to Pharaoh, right? And just how God breaks the system time and time again for him. I mean, to the fact that we're talking about just their backgrounds, like, again, Joseph, like Moses, not an Egyptian. He wasn't even raised with them.
Thank you.
But God put him in a position to be able to govern and to be in control of something that would then later help bless his family, feed his family.
Yeah.
God shows us in so many ways, and I'm so grateful that you brought that term to Faith First, Michelle. He breaks the system time and time again, but we have to be able to open our eyes and to see how he's doing it. That he doesn't do it in the way that we think that he's going to do it.
Yeah.
Because if this was my life, like, oh no, this definitely ain't how I want you to break the system, God. Like, we pray and we ask God to do stuff, Michelle, and I'm saying this because I am guilty of it. And then I want to dictate how God does it. You say clock God, right? Or we can see how he gonna do it. Like, that's not how this works. So when you pray or when God gives you a dream or a vision, just throw out your plans on how you think this is good, ready to go. Because it's probably not gonna look anything like what you expected.
Nothing.
But you have to trust him. You have to lean on him, not your own understanding, because how it looks to us. And even imagine the people on the outside, right? Imagine if, you told somebody about this dream, not just his brothers, but people on the outside, like, yeah, bro, that don't look nothing like what you said. Like, I know you said God was going to do this. And so a lot of us face that, right? Where we are open to, like, well, God told me he's going to do this. I know God going to do this and that. And then we get put in a pit, or we in that, we are in servitude and not at the head where we think we should be, and it looks nothing like what we told people. Don't give up, though. Don't lose hope. This is just a part of the story. This is not the end of the story.
Right.
Imagine at every change of point in Joseph's life, he saw it as, this is the end.
Oh, girl.
This is not the end.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, this is, even the nothing lasts forever. The good, the bad, all of that. Wherever you are, this is not the end. This is just a part of your story that God is using to build for that great finale, or whatever that is, that climax in your life that God has for you. This is not the end. And I was just like, man, what would have happened if Joseph been like, yeah, this is it.
Yeah. What would have happened? I mean, we know for sure his family wouldn't have been saved. He wouldn't have been reunited with his dad. Like, it's just so many things that could have happened and would have happened had he lost hope. And as you were talking, it reminded me of something that my pastor says, and he didn't coin it. He got it from somebody else, but he says there's never been a storm that didn't end. And I think that when we're in the midst of our storms, whatever our storms are, don't get me wrong, there are some circumstances that may be longer than others, but we get caught in our personal storms and we feel like it's an eternity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like it's going to happen forever. I'm going to be here forever, God. I say that because I feel that way sometimes. And then you look back and you're like, oh, well, it's only been a week, or it's only been a month or whatever. And you really have to remind yourself that these circumstances, all of them, like you said, good, bad, whatever, they're all temporary. Life is full of swift transitions, meaning you can go from being completely hopeless today to being infinitely blessed tomorrow, or vice versa. So there's so many ways and movements that God is taking us and shaping our life experience. And we just have to be mindful that no one place is permanent. Not even, not even grief, not even depression and anxiety, those things that we feel are terminal often, right? Those things don't have to be though. And we don't have to view them as permanent. We can see them as temporary seasons of our life. That way we can navigate around them and navigate through them. Because like I said, if you have that umbrella, if you got that covering, then you'll come out okay. Your feet might be a little wet, but your clothes will be dry. You know what I mean? You won't be drenched. You won't succumb to what you feel is your storm. So I definitely think, there we can never reiterate it enough that there's never a season that you face that should steal all your hope. Now, we are living in a time though where lots of people are feeling very much like they don't have any hope. And in fact, I've had several people tell me that. And there's been some times when I've felt like there is no hope, but yet joy comes in the morning. And the only reason that I believe that I've been able to kind of navigate through this season of complete and utter chaos is through being active in faith first, through these Bible studies, through my own praise and worship, my own teachings and readings. That has helped me stay grounded in the word. Mm-hmm. Because if nothing else, you need to have something that grounds you. And I would say that to whoever you are, wherever you're watching from, you need something that's going to ground you. Maybe that's a scripture, maybe that's a sermon, maybe that's a song. I would just say you need something that's going to ground you though, because these are times when you could easily be knocked out of the game very easily.
Yeah. When you were talking, I was just thinking about the scripture. And I said this in a video recently, like when the enemy comes in like a flood.
Yeah.
Right. Comes in like a flood. It's not really a flood, but it feels like it. It's overwhelming. And I speak from a place of anxiety. It's like, oh, this is it. Like Fred Sanford, this is the big one. Lord, I am coming home. Or just feeling like, Lord, you can take me now. I'm ready. I've seen enough. But when the enemy comes in like a flood, what encourages me is I know that is then where God steps in. Because I've maxed out on all that I can do, right? So this is it. I've hit my limits. But that is when he is strong. That's when he steps in. That's when he comes in. When you've maxed out, that's when he shows up. So for me, at least as of lately, when I begin to feel overwhelmed, that's when I was okay, God, I know you finna kick in.
Yes.
Come through, because this is it for me. Yeah. And so take heart and be excited. I know it probably sounds crazy that when you reach your max out point, that is the perfect place for God to step in. Because that's when God can do the supernatural. We don't need God for the day-to-day small itty bitty stuff. It's those things where it's like, I thought I was not going to make it. I had no idea. I felt like the world was collapsing on me. Because people feel that way. Yeah. I feel hopeless. I feel lost. Sometimes feel like, God, you don't even see me. But that is when he steps in, and that's when God really shows himself strong in our lives. And that's what makes our testimonies and our stories of faith that much stronger when we have maxed out. Because this is it. Like, it's all cool when it's like, I believe, my faith is good. Yes, Lord. But when it's like, yeah, Lord, like I don't even believe that no more. Yeah. Like I don't see this dream, this vision coming to fruition. I don't see your hand in this. Yeah. I don't see your favor on my life. That is when he steps in. And then being like Joseph at the end, knowing, like you said, the whole thing, don't take it personal. That, man, Joseph, again, not being bitter, not being angry, making it through all those different seasons. It didn't even just feed his family. It fed others.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, it ain't personal. What God is setting you up for, what he's allowing, because even sometimes, going back to Moses, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Mm-hmm. He hardened his heart. And so I know sometimes we think, that ain't a God.
Right.
Sometimes it is. Now, I'm very careful to say what is and what is not. Yeah. But I do know that there are times when he will work that way, where he will allow people's hearts to harden. People will turn their backs on you. and you like, man, I can't believe such and such did this to me. And it ain't even personal. This is
Yes.
a setup for something greater.
Yes.
This is something so much bigger than what you can even imagine or see.
Yes.
And so having that faith and that trust and not giving up, even when you want to give up, knowing that your obedience, what we always talk about, your willingness to hold on to your faith, it won't just feed your family. It'll go on and feed so many others.
Yeah. I mean, generations, right? Because that's
Yes,
ultimately
generations.
that's what Joseph does. And I think, you know, as you look at Joseph's story and you see these transitions and you see these different seasons of preparation, like I said, every season connects to the next, because Joseph going from Potiphar's house into Pharaoh's house allows Joseph to be able to interpret the dream that tells them about the famine that's coming. So from this dream, he sees we're going to have 7 years of fruitfulness, and then there are going to be 7 years of famine. So he was able to prepare. Preparation, right?
Yeah.
So it's like still so many layers even in that, because I think sometimes we get caught up in the big picture, right? So we see the big picture, but we can't see all the little things that God is also working out. And as you were talking about not taking it personal, I think about, you know, instances where maybe I've been wronged by somebody, and then years later they become friends. Like there are people, legitimately college friends, who I couldn't stand the ground they walked on at Georgia Southern, but now that we're adults, like they're my best friends, right? And so that, to me, that's also interesting, in that we get caught on those little rifts, those little things that we are quick to kind of like write people off and push them away. Now, by no means am I saying this is easy. By no means am I saying go be buddy with your enemies. What I'm saying is that God can use anyone in any season of your life. And so it's important for us to always stay open. And I see Anthony said, you know, trust the testing process, trust the process in general, because there are also parts of the process where God is formulating you to then connect with somebody in the future. And Bishop Jakes actually recently did a sermon about this, and he talked about how he feels like in the next season, when we get out of this turmoil and tumultuous season, he talks about preparing for unlikely partnerships. And to me, that's so interesting, because I think sometimes we feel like, well, you know, I don't know that person, but you don't know if they know God, and God might use that very person that you're thinking, well, how do I connect with that person, right? God can use those very people to elevate you and for you to have these unlikely partnerships. So we have to be careful about holding on to, like I said, that bitterness, right? That the wrongs that people have had over us. First Corinthians tells us what love is, and is keeping no records of wrong. And I think that we often like to keep the record, so that we can hold it over somebody's head. And sometimes God is slapping literally the record out of our hands so that he can bless us through them. And I believe that in this moment, not only was this reconciliation for Joseph with his family, but perhaps this was reconciliation of his brothers with him, because they were jealous, right? It started out, they were jealous. And that's what started this whole thing. They were jealous of Joseph's relationship with his dad. And so to see it all come full circle, and the man that they hated, the man that they wanted to kill, is now saving them, their families, and future generations. I know that was like, whoa, dog, we did this man so dirty. And now he's sitting here saving us. Like, this is perfect illustration of making your enemies your footstool. And I don't say that in a way that's supposed to be demeaning to his brothers, but more so to say that we like to hold the vengeance in our hands. And this is why God says vengeance is mine, because the setup that he makes and creates is much better than the little passive aggressive Facebook posts you make God like, I got something even bigger for you, and you don't even have to touch it. And
Ooh.
that, in my mind, it's just so beautiful. I keep going back to it, but the way that Joseph releases them from the responsibility of his demise, to me, is just, it's such a beautiful way to show that God has our back. He has your back. And you may feel like, yes, this season is hard. Yes, somebody wronged me. They're talking about me. They're putting dirt on my name. I don't know, that person cheated on me. Whatever. Let it go. Let it go so that you can do what God has for you. That is what preparation is about. Because if Joseph had stayed in that spirit of bitterness, in that spirit of hatred, because like Tori said, he could have he had the right to be. I mean, considering all that he went through, he had the right to be. He was separated from his family for over 2 decades. I mean, truly, honestly, the man could have easily been like, I don't really mess with y'all like that. But instead, and another word could have easily come out. But instead, he decided to choose grace. And so I think that it's also important to note that when we don't take it personal, it requires us to extend the grace that maybe we weren't even given.
Michelle, we can pack it up and go home, because I really wanted to scream when you was talking. I was like, yes to all of that. And that's just from personal experience.
Yeah.
When you biting your tongue to let somebody have it, and you just but it's eating you up on the inside. Yes. But then it comes full circle and it comes back around, and it's like now you're in a different position from the individual maybe that you had an issue with. Like I've experienced that. It's like, Lord. But like you said, to be gracious.
Yeah.
When you are in that position. To like I said, like you don't stun on them, Michelle, because like I don't know y'all, I don't fool with y'all. Nah, bro, you remember what you did? He could have easily, y'all remember? Because like you said, I keep a notepad sometimes. God, he's working on me. You remember January 2015 at 8:00 when you said, that's me. God is working on that. Because I also know that I don't want God to hold stuff over my head like that, right? That's what encourages me to let stuff go sometimes. All right, Lord, I know, because I be messing up. Like, I don't want you to hold it over my head. So we have to remember that, right? What we want God to do for us, we have to be willing to free other people. We want to be free. Still have to be willing to free others. But it's such an amazing story, just from even, you mentioned his brothers now having to bow to him, but even the fact that the people who oppressed him at one point, right? Like, now you hire me, you want me. Back then you didn't want me.
Yeah,
I wish I knew the number by heart. I would quote the number right now. But that's how God works. When you stay gracious, like you said, and humble, and you don't allow yourself to become angry in the season you're in, bitter in the season you're in, and revengeful. Because like Michelle said, the little get back you trying to get ain't nothing.
Nothing.
It ain't nothing. And it makes you feel good in the moment. But what God wants to do for you is long term. It's so much bigger than that small thing that you're trying to do on your own. And that's when you have to realize that, and I think Joseph realized this when he told his brothers this, that God is ultimately in control of his life. I don't care what you did.
Yes.
God is still in control of my life. I mean, no situation, no environment, no nothing is going to restrict me. Now, these are my thoughts and my beliefs. Right. Nothing is going to hold me down.
Nothing.
Everything that God has for me, I am going to get it. I don't care what the system looks like. I don't care how many walls they put up in front of me, how many glass ceilings I got to bust through to get there. Yeah. Nobody is going to be in control of my life other than God.
Yes.
And Joseph, he realized at that point that I know this is what y'all did, what y'all meant for harm.
Yeah.
God turned around and he does it for my good. Whatever you try to work against me, God is going to use that to elevate me. So no matter what season you're in, when you're feeling like all the odds are stacked against you, everybody against you, the black sheep of the family, whatever it is, God's going to use those things to elevate you. But you have to stay humble. You have to stay gracious. You have to be open to forgive, open to love, because otherwise you just may miss it.
Mhm.
Because I don't know, but I don't feel like God will allow you sometimes to get in certain positions because you ain't gonna do right. You ain't gonna do right. You ain't over it yet. You ain't
Definitely.
over it. And so we have to get beyond what people do to us. Like you said, it's not personal. A lot of times people do stuff to us, they don't even know why they're doing it.
Mm-mm.
Right? It's the attack of the enemy to go against whatever's inside Michelle.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with what you think it's about. It's spiritual. It's not what you see. It's not these carnal things. It's deeper than that. But we have to know that when those things are happening, God is setting you up.
Yeah.
And whether you believe that this is him personally doing it or this is just the will of some other individual, I'm still going to win.
Yeah.
It does not matter. I'm
Yeah.
still going to win because God is ultimately in control of our lives.
Come on, Tori.
Not people, not circumstances.
Come on.
It's God.
Yeah. Yeah. Girl, I'm just there's so many things. I don't even know where to begin. I was thinking about I probably 2 comments before you said something and it made me think about just the time that we're in, right? Because we've talked about it tonight. A lot of people are feeling away. Not only are we dealing with a pandemic still, right? We're dealing with all these other systems and governmental exercises that are happening. And I feel like people are feeling hopeless because we are set on our faith. Our faith is maybe more in the system than it is in the creator. And so we just need to, when we are reestablished that, I think that we will fix our minds on the things that they need to be fixed on. So for you to say that, God is in control of the system, that it makes your brain default back to faith versus what's in front of you. And I do believe that sometimes we get so caught up on the news and social media and all those things, and they make you think that there's no hope, and they make you think that everything's broken. There's no point in believing in anything. But it's like, no, as long as God is on the throne, I can still do and be who I need to be. So I can still get that dream job in a pandemic. I can still be the leader of that group. I can still create this organization or this business despite all the things that are going on around me. And so I think it's important for us, like you said, to have that posture of humility and graciousness, because that is truly what allows God to use us. He can't use us if we feel like we're doing it all on our own.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think when we were talking about stunting, right? When you get that thing, you typically start to feel a way about yourself, and it's like, oh yeah, I got this. I got it out the mud. You know how people say that? I did it on my own. I'm self-made. And God in the corner, like, for real?
Okay.
For real? Okay. See if you can get it back then. So it's important for us to never forget that umbrella was over us.
Yeah.
It carried us through the storm, that he was covering us the whole time, the whole way. Don't lose sight of the fact that while, yes, your haters might be human, you are also human too. And it's easy to fall from grace, and not fall out of grace, but fall from the grace, meaning the place you were at one time. He can easily demote you back to where you were if you aren't humble and you aren't gracious about where you are. So, man,
this was good.
So good. Like, I love how all of the messages just kind of like build upon the other. So good. So yeah, y'all. Joseph went through some things, but I'm hopeful and I'm encouraged by this text, because what we see is that all of the things that he went through, God was able to pull them together. A true illustration of Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. When God formed Joseph in Rachel's womb, he knew that he would save his family. And so, yes, it took some crazy circumstances, but God used all of those things to bring him to the place where he could save them. And so I'm hopeful that you found something in this that maybe speaks to your circumstance, that encourages you to keep going, that allows you to see every season as significant. And it also allows you not to take it personal, because it's not really about you. It's about the purpose. And so as long as you can keep your eye on the purpose, knowing that there is greater purpose, I think you'll be fine. So with that, Tori, you got any final words?
No, I think that was a great way to wrap it up. I enjoyed this message. I'm encouraged. As a reminder,
Yeah, me too. Me too. So I'll just say thank you all for joining us again. Please don't forget that we do have prayer every Friday for Faith First Fridays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. And you can join our group, recently renamed, Tori. I don't know if you noticed.
I saw it.
It's just Faith First now. So find us on Facebook, join our group, and you'll get all the details on our prayer call. We love y'all. We are still praying for you. We hope that you are blessed. We hope that you are keeping your hope alive, even if it's just a mustard seed. Please hold on to it. Don't lose it. God is still on the throne, and he is still doing a work in us. So just keep your faith. Love y'all. Be blessed. See you next week.